Přeji krásný den, začíná další díl Microsoft Talks a vzhledem k vašemu velkému zájmu jsme se rozhodli, že budeme pokračovat v tématu cybersecurity, tedy v tématu, které je vysoce aktuální i vzhledem k tomu, jak jsme vlastně my všichni byli nuceni velkou část svého pracovního života přemigrovat do toho online virtuálního prostředí. A samozřejmě s tím, jak roste tlak na to, se tam rychle přesunout se tam pokud možno co nejkompletněji a pokud možno tam fungovat ve větším počtu lidí, tak samozřejmě s tím stoupá i tlak na to, abychom se tam chovali opatrně, bezpečně a aby nejenom data nás, jakožto soukromých osob, ale zejména velkých firm zůstávala v bezpečí. Pod tou tíhou té současné situace jsme se tak rozhodli, že dáme dohromady absolutně unikátní sestavu a nabídneme vám vůbec poprvé v podstatě mimořádný díl, protože jsme dali dohromady sestavu řečníků, kteří jsou tentokrát z vícero zemí. No a to je také důvod, proč po zbytek toho současného vysílání přepneme do angličtiny. So this time we will hold the broadcast in English because we have not only audience but also guests from different countries. So especially it means for you, our audience, don't hesitate to ask anytime for anything. Just use Microsoft Team platform. You can send there your messages or your questions and I will ask our guests so you will get your answers. Let's start with introduction of our guests. The very first, Petr Fivka, Senior Investigation Manager at Microsoft. Welcome. We are in touch also with Michal Merta, a Cyber Fusion Central Lead at Accenture. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
We are in touch with Paula Januszkiewicz, Security Expert and CEO at Secure.
Hi, how are you?
We are fine. And we will continue with another guest, Jan Marek, Ethical Hacker and Co-founder at Cyber Rangers.
Good morning, and thank you for having me here at Studio.
Thank you as well. And Rostislav Janota, Director at Slovak Cybersecurity Center. Welcome.
Welcome.
Let's start with Petr Fivka, Senior Investigation Manager at Microsoft. I have a question because I really wonder in which area of cybersecurity do companies in the region, so for example, the Czech Republic or Slovakia, mistakes most often?
Thank you for the question. I would like to say my professional experience is largely around combating cybercrime, both previously in public sector as law enforcement officer and now working at the digital crime unit within Microsoft. So I can provide the view of someone who, although has never managed the cybersecurity business for a company, but has dealt with many situations when cyber attacks occurred and had to be understood and investigated. First of all, I don't think that the CE region, including Czech Republic and Slovakia, is so much different than the rest of the world from that perspective. And I would like to say that most of the issues I'm going to mention are rather applicable everywhere. But I would like to start with two things that are not really technical, but I believe they have an important influence on this issue. First is money. A cybersecurity for business has its cost, whether it's security products like firewalls, antivirus software, email protection, two-factor authentication, or cybersecurity services that needs to be applied, vulnerability penetration testing, compliance auditing, or incident response, and investing in people. Cybersecurity staff has its cost, and also some essential training for all employees also takes time and money. So all these costs could be scalable, adaptable to the size of the company. It still represents a non-negligible part of the operating budget. And unfortunately, especially in the tough periods like this crisis, when companies struggle to survive, saving and budget cuts are still often made on those kind of expenses at the first place. Another non-technical issue, and this is probably one that might be more specific to this region, because we have a lot of small-scale businesses here, is the perception of that small business that they are not really could be affected by an online attack because they are just too small and trivial and not important to interested attackers. And this is definitely an illusion. Attackers are interested in any target they discover as vulnerable. And this goes especially for the financially motivated criminal cyber attacks. And I would like to refer here to the annual cost of cybercrime study that Accenture made in 2019. They stated 43% of online attacks are aimed at small businesses, and only 14% of them are somehow prepared to defend themselves. Now, if I go down to a little bit more specific things, more technical, there are definitely a lot of suggestions. Everybody can find what to do and what not to do when you go to, to any search engine on internet and put the right words down. However, I would like to stop at 4 different issues that I would like to mention. First is poor password, or if you want to say identity management. At many companies, we can still see a lot of users are just not using complex enough passwords that would incorporate alphanumeric and special characters. We still don't see a lot of or enough two-factor authentication used, which is really pity, because in combination with a strong password is a really good safeguard for making sure that only those who are authorized can access. Then also many users or many people are using the same password for multiple business and personal accounts. That's also kind of big problem, and they are not changing these passwords periodically. Another group of issues, I would call them ineffective privilege management, providing the bulk of company users unrestricted rights and privileges to company security network results in having many users with admin privileges, and this may result in the data breaches. Another group of issues, I would call them outdated networks. So it's the absence of regularly updated fixes to address critical security bugs. That means well-known security patches, fixes for all hardware, software, including operating system. And the last thing, but definitely not in the importance, only in my list, is lack of involvement of everybody in the company. It used to be for a long time considered that the IT security is a problem of the IT department, and it is not. While IT personnel can definitely set up, well-trained IT personnel can definitely set up and execute the best of the security system and processes for business, guaranteeing cybersecurity at every level must be the duty of everybody who is employed in the company. And therefore, I think we are still lacking the company readiness initiatives that could be proper employee trainings on business risks linked to cyber attacks, highlighting to employees the importance of applying those regular updates, having same email practices, importance of strong password, proper business data classification, and frequent and periodic testing of these things, and drawing consequences if the lessons were not learned. So I would stop here.
Great, because you've already mentioned small or medium businesses, so I will hold this mention, and let's move to Michal Merta. Because imagine that I am, for example, manager of small or medium business. So how do I behave as a manager if I get a suspicion that the company has been target of a cyber attack?
So that's a good question. Use the word suspicion. Right? And it's very important to ensure that the attack is real. I mean, you need to first validate the source of the information. Why do you think you are under attack, or why do you think you were hacked? It could be, the source could be internal, it could be someone from your company, it could be third party, it could be state national agency, it could be police, or it could be even hackers itself, right? So it's very important to understand what is happening, if it's really the attack, because what I see in reality is very often someone is pretending that they attacked you, or they are trying to blackmail you, that they will go public with some information they might have, and they want you to pay the bitcoins to gain the money. So nowadays, with the internet, with easy accessibility, a lot of information are available on the internet. So everyone can get access to the leaked databases of the passwords, of the usernames, to the data. And if someone says that they have your data, it doesn't really mean that you were hacked. So this is very important to validate. Such a process is called the triage. And the outcome should be, yes, we were attacked or we are hacked, or no, this is a false positive. And I would say the balance is quite around 50-50. It's not like all time, yes, you are under attack. So that's one thing. But what will happen if you're already under attack? So let's consider the situation that we were attacked. What to do now? A lot of people, and historically it was a good practice to immediately disconnect the devices from the network and potentially wipe them out, just to make sure it's clean. I would say nowadays it's a bit different because the hackers are quite active, and you don't know if they are still in the network, in the environment or not, right? It's very difficult to identify. So what they can do is they monitor very often, they monitor the devices they attacked, and suddenly if they see that there are critical devices from your company being offline, they will do actions. They will try to delete the evidence, they will try to go as hidden as possible. So that's very important to mention. So what I recommend is to remotely take a snapshot of the drives, of the file systems, of the RAM for further investigation. That's very important. Of course, if we are talking about malware or let's say ransomware, which is now quite popular, especially in the Czech Republic, that's a different case. These auto-spreading things you need to block immediately, right?
Yeah, I understand. We'll speak about it more later. But let's move to Rostislav Janota, director at Slovak Cybersecurity Center. I just wonder, if, from your point of view, what should the company do if it finds that it has been attacked?
There are so many different actions recommended. I'm pretty sure my colleagues before mentioned some of them already. Anyway, let's start from the compliance side. It depends on the type of the business, of the type of the company. There is a lot of compliance type regulations coming within, for instance, the finance, banking industry. At least, for instance, the Slovak bank usually has 10 to 15 different addresses for incident reporting, Europe-wide, not only in Slovakia. Only one of that report is coming to the mother of the company. The rest are the different regulatory organizations in Europe. Of course, on the other side, very important are the internal activities, but it's important to understand that in the first second of the incident detection, organization usually don't know much about the incident itself. Those are the first informations, first clues that something bad is going, not necessarily enough information for a real incident handling. So my recommendation is to start investigation. Very carefully start investigation. Carefully, it's important word, because if you would be very loud in this phase, you can create a reaction from the attacker side, which might be quite dangerous. And on the other side, as you are obliged to collect evidences which could be used for the future, and the security investigators would need it for the investigation. Any kind of loud action would impose a reaction from the attacker in a way that they will try to remove all the evidences, including maybe your data. So be careful.
Seems we have some kind of technical and sound issue. So let's move to Paula Januszkiewicz, and we will get back to Rostislav Janota in a moment. Paula, when we say hacker attack, so-called, people often image mask someone sitting at a laptop and attacking a company in a digital environment and remotely. But is this assumption right?
Well, not necessarily, because when we look at the statistics right now, we've got more than 34% of businesses around the globe that are affected by insider threats yearly. So it's not necessarily someone that's sitting outside And in general, that's not necessarily someone that is attacking remotely, but it can be someone that is working for that specific organization. And in general, the insider threat, it's undoubtedly like one of the most underestimated areas of cybersecurity. However, like recent development and insider threat reports, they have indicated the rapid increase in the number of insider attacks. And this pretty much, I would say, forced all of us to pay closer attention to the damaging nature of the insider threats. And when we also look at some other stats, these ones are actually by Panda Security. They say that the threats have increased by 47% within the past 2 years. So it's not necessarily someone masked or in the hood or maybe just wearing a normal clothes sitting outside, but it could be, for example, some employee in a very innocent way, for example, opening an attachment and then effectively attacking our infrastructure, especially in the times of coronavirus when we've got interesting phishing attempts. Well, in general, also looking at some stats, the malware and phishing grew by 569%. So that's incredibly huge number from February to March 2020. While when we look at the new samples of ransomware, these rose by 72%. So there is definitely something to deal with, and that also shows our focus and the need of implementation of code execution prevention and some intelligent threat detection.
Thank you. We'll be in touch with you in a moment. But now let's discuss this issue with Jan Marek, ethical hacker and co-founder at Cyber Rangers. So, what are the first, but maybe sometimes not so obvious indications for a company and its management that it has been attacked by a hacker?
Yeah. So, what's the obvious? The case is that the obvious very strongly depends on what's the cybersecurity measures level implemented in the company. For some companies, basically what they can see is only if the system is up and running, and another company can track event logs, can see the details from the event logs, and so on. But from our point of view, what we saw at our customer side, the less obvious things that happened previous or before the attack was triggered, or the attack was detected, was for example, the spam email stopped, or the phishing email stopped, or the rate of the accessing public available ports to the internet. That this significantly decreased, and so on. So the case is that if something is under the threshold or over the threshold, it's always something that's not normal and something that you need to take a look. And so from our point of view, basically the most stuff that we saw was the decreasing level of network activities to the public available endpoints.
Let's move to Petr Fivkas, Senior Investigation Manager at Microsoft. There's a question by Lukáš. Peter, regarding small and medium enterprises, what percentage of annual budget do you think they should allocate for cybersecurity to make their enterprise safe? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I'm not sure whether I'm not going to disappoint you. I mean, as I said, I never ran a cybersecurity business, neither for a small or bigger company. So it would be the pure guess. I think small and medium business, they always have kind of challenging issues with the budget. So I would say, more generally, I would approach this question differently. In the current situation, where we see how the threats are more sophisticated, how the small businesses are also becoming targets for the attackers. I think, and I don't want to kind of scare you or discourage you, I would more be thinking like, maybe I would be looking into some different solutions than to take care of my cybersecurity myself. Okay, and this definitely is not from my side any kind of moving to the cloud business pitch. It could be not Microsoft, it could be somebody else, but I think in the current situation when the level of sophistication is so high, I would rather be thinking on the technical side, using a benefit of some bigger provider that can already now also give you some kind of guarantees, and maybe invest more on the side of educating your own people just to make sure that they have these good practices, because the social engineering is still one of the most effective and most popular way of attack. So I would, running a small business, if this was my case, I would be looking for some strong allies in giving the security into their hands, maybe through some cloud services, and then concentrate my efforts on making sure that my people don't commit those mistakes. They would be clicking on the kind of messages that are created in order to really spark the interest. Therefore, this COVID increase that Paula mentioned, of course, whenever there was a message with a COVID in the subject, everybody was rushing and tried to read it. So this is very psychological. The social engineering is really big part. So I would rather concentrate on that, because I think playing the catch-up game technically with the bad guys is not probably the one that I would recommend.
Actually, let's pass this question. Let's hold with this topic about small and medium businesses, and let's pass it to Michal Merta, Cyber Fusion Central Lead at Accenture. So, Michal, how do you think about it? So where's the line to ensure that my business is safety?
Yeah, so I think it's very difficult to answer this in general, because it depends on many factors. First is the industry of the company. You know, there are industries where the cybersecurity hygiene or maturity is typically higher. I'm talking more about banking and insurance, where there are regulators, etc. So these companies are typically pretty good in terms of the cybersecurity, and that's not only valid for the big companies; it's also for the small and medium ones. Because if there is a small company, you know, doing digital business, then probably they spend much more investment on security than someone who is making the chairs from the wood, you know. So that's a little bit different situation. So the first thing is industry and the maturity level. I mean, every single company nowadays has to have at least basic security controls in place, like firewalls, vulnerability management programs. It was mentioned here before by Peter as well. There are a lot of things, basic ones, which needs to be in place. Otherwise, it's incredibly easy for attackers to get in, right?
Let's move to Rostislav Janota, director at Slovak Cybersecurity Center. I just wonder, where's the line between trying to handle with any issue, let's say privately only inside my company, and when can I, let's say, when can I ask some state actor for help, and what kind of help can I expect?
Basically, here in Slovakia, formally and really any kind of incident should be primarily handled by the company itself. But company has possibility at any time to ask the state government entities for help. It's very even are not building all cybersecurity skills within the company. Like, for instance, forensics. For the typical company, forensics is not a skill they need to have internal. So state government is ready to help, but the initiative must come from the company itself to ask, hey guys, we need help because we have something which we are not able to handle.
And do you think companies, for example, in Slovakia, know about this possibility to cooperate with state actor?
We are trying to communicate with companies. We are attending all conferences or most of the conferences regarding cyber. We have a lot of our own organized events, cybersecurity club, many other things where we are trying to communicate to the primarily big companies which are regulated under the Slovak cybersecurity registration as a provider of the essential services, these options. So I'm pretty sure that most of those companies are aware of such help. With most of the companies, we have quite regularly communication where they asking many questions on what to do in the preparation phase if they do not understand some of the duties coming from the legislation, or just they want to consult questions which appear during the implementation of the cybersecurity measures in the companies.
Let's move to Paul Januszkiewicz. How often and what kind of test should I do if I want to keep my company or my team in vigilance?
Well, thank you for this question. First of all, when we have the situation right now, when we work remotely, there's lots of challenges that are related with publishing new services. So our so-called cybersecurity posture, it's definitely more rich than it used to be, at least for some of the companies. So one of the most important focus points would be to deliver simply an external penetration test to verify what kind of services are they vulnerable, are they technically misconfigured for some reason. It might be that right now when we are currently running VPNs 24/7, it might be that our VPN solution, for example, it's not up to date. So just these simple checks would be definitely useful here to make sure that hackers won't treat us as a low-hanging fruit. And of course, the next step so far in this case would be to introduce the internal penetration tests as well to verify what are the risks related from the user perspective. So not every organization is perfect in security, or actually there are not many of those. Therefore, it's nice to see how infrastructure looks like from the user perspective. So when, for example, phishing, as we here mentioned, gets to the user workstation, when this attachment gets executed, when user runs the code that we don't trust, question is simply what can happen. So what are the accesses that user has? Can, for example, data be encrypted by simply running a code through phishing or from phishing email that unfortunately goes through? So that kind of profiling is always needed in the organization, because that also indicates us direction that we should choose while implementing the good stuff for securing of the infrastructure.
There is a question by Alex, so I will pass it to Paula. From your professional point of view, how much has the crisis affected companies' approach to digital security, and has this accelerated digitalization in companies made hackers easier to find security gaps in an organization?
Well, there are some initial stats already available, but in general, based on the practice, what we can see from our customers' perspective, it did affect for sure. And we're going to learn, I guess, in a couple of months how, but eventually we can see that there is this phishing that comes through. There is, as we mentioned, that when we see ransomware, or when we see a COVID, we simply open an email and it might be eventually a ransomware. So we can see that there are much more services published as well on the edge of the infrastructure that could be overused by hackers. So it's kind of hard to say, because it won't pretty much apply for every company here, but eventually we are also sharing a laptop with some other family members. That also creates additional threat over here. We can have on our business laptop or even private laptop applications that are not up to date, maybe for gaming, and that could be also a point of entry. So that mixing of a personal stuff and work stuff, especially for workstations that are not 100% perfectly managed, it already increases a risk. So how much we're going to learn in the future stats, but by our customers, we see it does affect.
Paula mentioned very interesting point about, for example, updated games in your laptop. I just wonder when I am the person which is interesting enough for hackers to force them to find this kind of way to my PC.
Basically, there are, the most used attack these days are through emails. Business emails compromise, using the private emails. So I'm not sending the, some malicious executable or attachment through the company email. The hacker is sending it through the private email because it's publicly available on LinkedIn, Facebook, and so on. And so you can just try to use this email because it can be much less secured. The technologies behind they are not so advanced, and so that's the one thing. And the second thing, and this on these computers that you use for your daily use, for gaming, as Paula mentioned, or for browsing the internet. They basically have only the antivirus and that's all. And no code execution policies, no application whitelisting systems, no, very probably disabled firewalls and so on. So to target those, bring your own device scenarios is very effective for the attacker.
Peter Fifka, let's discuss and imagine that I'm a manager of a small or medium business. I have, for example, few dozens of employees, and so I have to somehow handle with this issue. And so how to find where I should improve my security, my cyber security?
If you are managing a team, or you are a manager of the big of the smaller company, I think again, I would say investing in the people is the first thing you will be doing. Of course, there are things that you need to get right on the technical side, some basic stuff like we were just talking about, before about when you are using the company network, make sure that the privileges, admin privileges, are given only to those that really need to have them, so you are protecting eventually the access to the critical business data. But I'm repeating myself. I can't repeat enough the importance of every employee should be aware. I think the raising awareness of the employees, and in any size of the company, of course, bigger companies, now we can see there is more institutionalized training. Like in every big corporations, people go through regular training on cybersecurity essentials, and of course after that, IT departments are basically internally sending phishing messages and are checking who actually opened it. So basically you have this kind of path that firstly we increased your awareness, we then provided you training, and then we are testing whether you actually took something from the training, and would you be actually after that training would you behave differently? And I think while this is now quite well advanced in the bigger corporations, I think this is something where the small businesses are basically just not yet there. And I understand it's challenging because who is going to do this for me? So okay, you can either call out for some trainers outside, but if I was in the place of somebody who is responsible for the cyber security in the smaller company, I would try to probably develop something on my own or with the help of somebody who can advise me, which would be a very good compromise of the impact this could make and how much actually that would cost that company.
Michal Merta, do you want to continue?
Yes, I mean, I agree with what Peter said and Paula as well. There are some basic things which need to be done. Pen testing, especially nowadays on external infrastructure is for sure, but also internal application pen tests, red teaming and browser simulations. That's clear. Also the education of the employees, that's a must. But on the other hand, you will never be 100% successful with the employee education. There will be always one or more who will fail the test. I mean, we do this kind of campaigns quite often. I see the rate of people who are failing the test, especially if the phishing email is prepared nicely, and we are talking about 20%, even more, right? So it really depends how much time the hacker has, how carefully they prepare the phishing email. But then there are controls which could be implemented in place which will prevent, even though if the employee will click on that attachment or on that link, there are things who could help to reduce the risk, such as application execution policy, whitelisting, network segmentation. Companies should consider if all employees need to have admin access to the workstations, etc. So there is a lot of things which could be implemented, which will reduce the risk of, basically expanding the hacking to the next level to prevent the lateral movement.
Actually, you've mentioned a time for hackers, so please, that's for all of you. We can check the latest data we have, so please, if we can show it. It's very interesting to see how much time sometimes hackers have. So if we can see a graph and hard data, yeah, you can see that failing investments, you can see there, and average companies. So how the companies perform in cybersecurity. And you can see that 97% said all breaches had an impact lasting more than 24 hours, and we can still check it. And so, looking at this, Mr. Janota, what do you think about those numbers? If we can show it once more, just to have it on eye, and your answer, what do you think about those data?
There are many different inputs, sources around statistics. I'm usually using the little bit different numbers, but at the end, the same direction. Numbers which answers the question how much time the attacker needs to fulfill their goals. It of course varies on what kind of goals are there, but anyway, it's between, let's say, 50% of attackers needs less than days, maximum 1 week. On the other side, there is a question how much time organizations need to detect a problem, and the average time currently in the world is more than 200 days, which means that in average organization detect a problem long time after attacker fulfill all goals and is out of the organization. Just remains some information about the activity in the network. So for me, all the numbers, regardless the source, shows that organizations are far behind abilities of the attackers, and we have a lot of to do in order to improve our ability to fight against any kind of attacks, regardless, to some extent, regardless seniority of the attacker.
You just want to continue? Yep.
Yeah. I just want to end one point. The third point basically was saying that 97% took more than 24 hours. The breach took more than 24 hours. And
yeah, we can see her. Yeah.
The third point, more than 24 hours. Basically, I just want to say, or just to emphasize the difference between the attack and the breach. The attack can take 5 minutes or 1 minute or 10 seconds because it's very easy to do something against the unsecure web service or something like that. But the impacts of those attacks, and so the breach itself, can be lasting for years even, because if you can detect the attacker inside the network, it can be hidden for 10 years or it can be much more even. So you can say that the attack or the breach is basically solved. But after 5 years, you got the attacker back inside your internet network. So that's a really big problem, because then you got much less signals to detect that the attacker is inside the network, because it was inside the network for the last 5 years.
Actually, that was a case with Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I guess. Well, but no. Let's move now to Paula. And there is a question by Lukáš. A lot of problems are throughout the history of computer security connected to password authentication. Isn't it time for the big guys in the market try to push a better authentication methods to deprecate passwords?
Well, definitely that is the direction. And also last year on the keynote, Satya Nadella was mentioning that we are getting into the era of passwordless authentication. And of course, we are getting into this direction, but that shift, it's not an easy shift because for so many years since IT has been really there, we've been using passwords to authenticate. Of course, the second layer, second solution mean of authentication was smart cards, and then we have authenticator apps and so on, different tokens, but that requires development on the other side to accept that kind of a form of authentication. So just to give a scope over here, so we can build a new app and we can have an app, for example, that's somewhere out there in the cloud that natively will support multi-factor authentication, for example, or in general authentication using the Authenticator app. But for example, in the architecture of the operating system itself, we've got, for example, services and regular service accounts, which we've got either service accounts or group managed service accounts. But eventually, that kind of a way of authentication, which we call logon as a service, that requires the password. So that will require a huge, drastic change in general in the concept of not only an operating system, but everything that we use around us. So it's like same thing with the virtualization. And I'm sure everybody here remembers the time where Microsoft acquired also the virtualization technologies and so on. So that was the time when everything was starting. That was a year like 2004 or something, or even earlier than that. And now we've got 16 years later. And this is the moment where we speak freely about cloud. Virtualization is obvious for us. So that was quite a long time, even in IT. So I believe that maybe for the passwords, it's going to be shortened than that because it's not the virtualization of a whole system and all of the services, but still it's going to take some time. So definitely a great direction. I personally, and I believe you guys too, do not like passwords because even the management of them, it's challenging. We've got apps and so on, but not everybody likes it. Okay, we can deal with it, but what about regular employees, regular users? That has been always a challenge. Definitely time for change, but step by step.
There is one more question, this time for Peter Fivka, by Dan. What is these days more safe from a business point of view, to have confidential data on a local server or to move them to any cloud solution? Thanks.
I would say that it's definitely, from my point of view, the storing data on the local disk, definitely on the local user's machine, is not safe neither from the security but also from the data protection perspective. So because if you use a kind of company storage somewhere like something like OneDrive, you can really apply centrally very strict rules for access and also kind of make sure that you are compliant. It's not only about security. Now, companies with the GDPR and all the new regulations, they have a lot of compliance obligations. So I would say in this question, we are combining the security also with the compliance, which is so important for businesses to really be on the sweet spot and not to be facing any potential regulatory problems. So I would definitely go for cloud and for well-protected cloud with the provider who can secure all the security, but also who gives you all the power of controlling what you are doing with your data and how you handle it.
We have one more question from our viewers, this time for Paula, and then I will pass this question also to Michal Merta. But let's start with Paula. There's a question by Jakub. Paula, I would like to ask you, what steps should a company take to be on-premise safe? And what processes should a company set up so that its employees would not become a cyber risk? Thank you.
Well, that is a question with a very long answer, right? But eventually, when we've got company that is with a model of managing solutions on premise, which we are all familiar with. Of course, it's not like a very much in the past. Right now, we're still dealing with this. We've got, in general, one of the biggest threats, which is coming from the inside, so technically employees. And one of the major things to implement for sure would be to focus on the email security. So anything that could be like anti-spam, anti-phishing filter, because that is a very obvious way, as we were mentioning here on a panel, to get access to the infrastructure, not only the employee's laptop. And of course, another way to protect ourselves would be to implement things related with whitelisting. So in general, running or prevention of running the code that we don't know, as I have mentioned before, they're also focusing as well on limitation of usage of the PowerShell, because the threats that we are seeing right now are also focused on PowerShell. And for example, we could have ransomware even in PowerShell. So that is the case. And within the Windows 10 platform, we've got great mitigations. For example, exploit guard that we could use that could allow us to not only in general prevent known exploits and so on, but also to implement something that we call attack surface reduction rules that could, for example, prevent creating the child process from Excel. And that is a simplest way to mitigate the situation when someone has an attachment in the email, opens it up, there is a macro, we run it, and now what? Well, in most of the organizations, that macro will still run. And with the attack surface reduction rules, you're going to have information that there is actually a threat. So platform security right now, it's so good that when configured well, that totally minimizes the risk and rises the bar for hackers in the company that's managing things on-premise, but also keeping things up to date and performing the regular pen tests to verify from the third-party perspective how our infrastructure looks to the hackers.
And Michal, Myrta, your point of view, how to protect my company from internal hackers?
So on top of what Paula said, there are a few things which I would recommend definitely. When we talk about protecting the data, I would say data leak protection services we should have in place, definitely. That means that the employees, the internal ones, will not be able to send sensitive data. They will not be able to copy it to the USB drives, to take it out. That's very important, I think. In some cases, it could be also physical security, where people can take the things out. So I know companies where they are doing the physical checks when you leave and when you enter. So when you enter, you need to lock your notebooks, electronic devices, etc. When you are leaving, you need to comply with that. But the last thing, the most important one, I think, encryption. Encryption should be in place not only for data itself, but also for the communication, for transmission. When the data is in transmit, it always has to be encrypted, either through SSL when we talk about HTTPS, or even when we share the files with the vendors or with the customers, you should always put some encryption in place. Maybe just encrypt the file, send it over, send the password over the different channel, like over the phone or call, something like that. So that's my point of view.
It seems to me that Peter Fivka wants to add something, right?
Just very tiny thing on the top of Michal said, make sure that nothing is taken out that shouldn't be taken out. Also, I would like to remind, nothing should be taken in that should not go in. I remember a couple of cases where there were kind of the vector of attack was by just giving the USB drives, at some conferences, or just sometimes even stupidly just to be left in front of the entrance of the company, and some people were taking them, and it's enough they put it into the USB drive, and you have your intruder inside. So just I just wanted to add on that point.
Anyway, let's move with the topic right now, because how to start with all of this things and this issue. So how to start to build my own security?
Yeah, I think that the first point you need to do is to, assess your environment. You need to know what you have. You need to know what you are running. You need to know how secure you are. So you need to start with the assessment, inventories, asset management. Then you can proceed to test, penetration testing, red teaming with physical security assessments, adversary emulations if you are critical infrastructure of the state, because these adversary emulations are simulating only the one point that the attacker can use to go through the company, to go through the Active Directory and just do the evil stuff. And then you need to do the second stuff before you implement those cybersecurity technologies and processes. That's basically you need to find your critical assets. You need to do some risk management, risk analysis, because you need to know what's critical for your company, because then you can focus on this specific asset for this specific item. And then you can use the right technology to protect this. And if I can go back to the testing, you need to test the technology, you need to test the people, and you need to test the process itself, because everything can be very smart, but the people are doing bad things. They are taking bad stuff to the company or taking bad stuff from the company, and that's the problem itself. So processes, technologies, and the people, because people, as was many times mentioned, phishing is a very big problem these days. So, and as we are, for example, doing phishing campaigns to test the employees, we are just spreading the company with those lot of phishing emails that are not so successful at those companies. But then we are sending another wave of these emails saying, "Thank you, you catch the phishing, and now you can click to get the some benefit." But the second one is the phishing. So you need to combine these tests with the people, and then when you know what you are having, what you have, what's the cybersecurity current security level of the company, then you can proceed to find the right tools. And at this time, you need to first analyze what you are currently implementing in the company, because still you need to operate the IT. And then you can deploy new security silos, new security solutions, and after that you need to operate them as well. So you can't think about it all, only as a to buy some tool, to buy some licenses, to buy some hardware. But for example, you need to hire new employees with the new skills, or to get a contract with a partner, with the external company that can help you with that. So. To prepare or to build the very stable cybersecurity measures and protections at the environment, you need to plan. You need to plan so much that basically 70% of this is the time spent for the planning, for the budget planning, for the technology planning.
You've mentioned the very beginning how to start, but let's move to Rostislav Janota, because on the opposite side of the spectrum are state-organized hackers. So we can hear in mass media information about Russian or Chinese danger, but is this a danger also for me, being let's say a manager of, I don't know, for example, cargo company? Should I be afraid of Chinese or Russian hackers?
Definitely, yes. It's very clear that foreign state-organized attacks are concentrating on many different topics, including bigger companies, critical infrastructure in the states, media and organizations having influence on public opinions, on the political situation, on information flows within the countries, etc. So if you are, for instance, working at the cargo railway company or something similar, you might be a part of their interests.
Peter Fivka?
I'm sorry to jump in. I think it's just very timely to mention, like last week actually, there was an indictment in the US when US authorities indicted 7 individuals, 5 from China and 2 from Malaysia, and they were member of the state nation sponsored group is known under the name of Barium, but also APT41 or Wicked Panda. You maybe have heard about it. And they were kind of indicted for computer intrusion, affected over 100 victims, also in the US, but also abroad. And they were really targeting development companies, computer hardware manufacturers, social media companies, non-profit organizations, as Rastislav mentioned, universities. Really no difference what was the size. Like information and data is the nowadays gold. And I think I know about this case a little bit more because my unit, together with other part of Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center, and also companies like Google, Facebook, and Verizon, we were kind of involved in tracking these attacks down. And so that was one of the very recent results that show that public-private partnership is really the way to kind of encounter this phenomenon.
Actually, I'm not a professional in all of the cybersecurity issue, but I have a question. I'm not sure who is the right one who will answer, but can someone of you answer me? What's the difference between protecting state actors and private companies? Is it a question for Mr. Janota, or I'm not sure actually.
Maybe let's rephrase question, please, again.
The question was if there is something different between protecting private companies and state actors.
Protecting, you mean on the let's say victim side?
Yeah. If I want to protect myself, or let's say I'm an employee. So if you're looking at this cybersecurity issue, so is there something different if I want to protect, let's say, some state actor, let's say, I don't know, State Department or Ministry of Health, for example, and on the other hand, to protect private company, which is, let's say, kind of health business?
Basically, no. The proper way is to have implemented a risk management process where the proper security measures, depending on the level of risk to your operations, would be as a result. So definitely, you use different security measures if you protect nuclear power plant, hospital, and municipality or private company. On the other side, in the case of big companies, I don't see any bigger difference between the state-owned or private-owned organization. The ownership status is not the differentiator between security measures.
Jan Marek wants to add something.
Yeah, I just want to say that there are same people. The employees are the same people, so they are basically secure the same way. The phishing can work the same way. They are using the same type of laptops, computers, and so on. So it doesn't matter if it is privately held or public company. Or the thing is that, from my point of view, it's quite sad. It's that there is much more money in the private sector, to spend on the cybersecurity than in the state sector. So I think that the bigger problem, I think, that is the budget for implementing those cybersecurity measures and processes.
Thank you very much. And I just want to thank you not only to you, but to all our guests, Peter Fivka, Michal Merta, Rostislav Janota, Vola Januszkiewicz, and Jan Marek, our today's guests. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much.
And lady.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much also for our audience, for your interest, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Goodbye.